Got on my leather jacket Thriller. The show ain't nothing Miller. Man, I'm a lady killer. If I want her, I'm a stealer. I promise I can make her fly away like caterpillars. So if you don't know by now, then you should probably get familiar.
Get familiar. Hi, everybody. Leticia Remauro from the Vaughn Agency, and I'm here with my partner, George. Hi, George.
Hi, everybody.
And today we have a very special guest. George, it seems like it's all the people that I love that come on the show. Today we have the guy that calls me Big Sis, and I call him Little Brother. His name is Tony Herbert, and I love him with all my heart. He is the founder of Advocate Without Borders and Housing Residents First, two very important groups that have done a lot in the community. He's also a TV show host. It's called The Morning Stretch 2.0. It airs on Sunday at 10 a.m. And you could find it on Tony Herbert's Facebook page, and the handle is @TonyHerbert. Also, Tony has run for public office twice. The first time he ran against James Davis. Second time he ran for public advocate. And Tony is the author of a book that's coming out in September. It is called From Bullets to the Ballot. And you can pre-order that. And if anybody wants to know where to get the links to pre-order, you can just inbox us. So welcome, little brother, Tony Herbert.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Hey, George, how's it going? Thank you.
Pretty good, Tony. We're really happy to have you. You're one of my favorite people too. I haven't earned the brother yet, but
Thank you.
I'm happy to have you here.
We here, George. We here.
Well, we asked Tony on the show today because obviously we want to talk about current events. But Tony, before I do, you have to give us a little background about the book, because this is so exciting to have your life spoken about in a book, and I cannot wait to order it. So talk to us about it, please. Tell us what we're going to find when we order your book.
Well, the book kind of, it's kind of like a chronicalization of how I got involved in politics. And just to give you a little teaser of it, I ran against James Davis back in 2003, and unfortunately we knew what happened. He was murdered inside City Hall, and it speaks to how at first they thought I was involved and thought that I was a shooter, and I had about 50 cops in my apartment, coming, to look for me, SWAT and everybody. So I talk about that in the book, and I talk about the game of politics that our own political party plays against us, as minorities, and how they take advantage of us, and basically don't afford us an opportunity to really vote for people we want. So there's a lot of disenfranchisement. I talk about all of the, how the election that I ran in against James was stolen by, a person who's currently in office in the state level. And, basically, if they had lost that, they probably wouldn't be where they're at. But we talk a lot about that in the book.
I think it's so important for people to understand what goes on behind the scenes. And, we're, especially now as a country, we're so divided now into our political parties, right? We've got the Republicans on one side, the Democrats on the other side, but the majority of people, I think, are not into that identity politics. The majority of people are right in the middle, the moderates. And I think that your book and the information in it, I think will open a lot of people's eyes as to the games that are being played. I mean, one of the reasons that you ran for office, right, and is so that people don't go unopposed in the
right. I ran so that I can challenge folks in that the issues of the community was on the table, and to basically shine a light on those who are running to make sure that that I can't say that they would be honest, but at some given point it would have you talk about the issues and force their hand. So if they should have gotten elected, that they will actually go out there and do what they said they were going to do. And I still hold them to that task.
Yes, you do.
Yep.
So let's talk about how you hold them to task and what you're doing in the community now. I mean, two very important community organizations that you founded and are still working hard with. Why don't you tell us a little bit about both Advocates Without Borders and then Housing Residents First?
Well, Advocates Without Borders is born of the idea that as I worked in government, as you know, I worked for the city council. I worked for then, may she rest in peace, City Councilwoman Priscilla Wooten. I worked I worked for Congressman Towns as one of his community liaisons in one of the catchment areas of his congressional district. And I also served as the statewide director of African American outreach for the New York State Senate Democratic Caucus during the reapportionment task force time. So I was afforded an opportunity to learn a lot about government, understanding the bureaucracy and understanding basically, what are the nuts and bolts that would get us active so that we can get access to the resources that our communities need. And it wasn't really a black-brown thing, it was or a black-brown-white thing. It was about being able to have the opportunity to have the democratic process work for us. And that's what the Advocates Without Borders is all about, shining light on those individuals who would take that away from us and not afford us an opportunity to gain access to the resources that would be most affordable and most accommodating to those of us that pay taxes, and to those of us who need the extra help. And that's why I keep the fight going. I deal a lot around gun violence. I shine the light on that. I was the person, I was out there beating the drums with regards to holding the press conference to shame this city into doing something and what have you that would be proactive. I even dragged a couple of coffins to City Hall to hammer the point to the mayor that I'm afraid that the next individuals that would be in those coffins would be any one of our children. And that forced his hand to actually get on board with a program that was brought out of Chicago called Ceasefire. And they turned it around and they turned the whole violent thing into what they thought was a mental kind of capacity thing where they can find funding. So they started calling it Cure Violence. So I'm responsible for helping to bring millions of dollars to the table to actually help organizations get that funding so that they can go in our community and be proactive and not have a reactive, legislative body. So that is what Advocates Without Borders was able to achieve. And going forward, we probably worked with about maybe 1,500 cases personally that I've actually helped solve. And it runs the gamut with regards to housing, issues with the police department. I've gone and got people out of the cells on small issues and what have you. But if you had a gun, you kill somebody, I couldn't help you.
Yeah.
But there was a myriad of things, whether it was unemployment, whether it was, I have rats in my backyard. I got phone calls to help people as much as I could. And like I said, outside of even working in government, I processed over 1,500 cases myself. I get an average of 25 to 50 calls a week with people that need some assistance in some shape, form, or fashion. So, housing residents first is my baby, because that is where I'm really interested in galvanizing the voting strength and the voting power of those that live in public housing that they don't realize they have. And by being able to get them to the polls and voting for people that would actually do the bidding of what they need them to do, then they would be the powerhouse and the block vote that will change the dynamics of what's happening in our communities thus far. So those are the things that I'm working with. And outside of other organizations I chair, I'm also getting ready to chair and be the executive director of a new business advocacy group called the Diverse Business Alliance. And that's affording me an opportunity to advocate for small businesses on all levels of government. I even talking about helping those that have federal contracts that's not being honored by the general contractors. So I'll be working to help a lot of subcontractors on a national level.
That's fantastic. And I want to acknowledge right now that your fan club has joined us, Tony. We've got Shanita Williamson's joined us. Lenora Palermo. Okay. Brenda Gilbert. Susie Q.
Susie Q.
I
love Susie Q. All of those people you name, I have a very, very good relationship with.
Yeah, well, that's why I call them your fan club. Keisha Hamilton.
Keisha.
Is with us. And I think that's it. Now, well, they're all saying that everything that you said is in the lead up are facts, and they're giving you praise for that. So there, many of you who are watching have seen Tony on ABC, on NBC. He's on the news on a regular because he does talk about what's going on in the community. And Mario Baskin just joined us too.
DJ Mario.
Yeah. So Tony, let's talk about what's going on right now, right? In the world, because it's not just in New York. It's not only in our country, it's around the world that we're seeing protests. We're seeing people who are pouring out their heart and to the family of George Floyd, and they're calling for an end now to the violence that's going on in communities with police and the African American community. So talk to us a little bit about what you've been doing during all this time and what you think about the call right now that's on the table to defund the police across the slate, across the board. We have it in New York, we have it in California. So why don't you talk to us a little bit?
You have it in London. There's a lot going on. First, I just want to offer again my condolences, as we have been doing for the last couple of days, to the family of George Floyd. For the most part, what took place was totally tragic and totally unnecessary. Truth be told, I'm the first person. I don't have a hate for anybody that I know. They have a primary job of protecting and or serving. What I do have a problem with is folks that they take advantage of the authority that they have. And it does come across, disrespectful to people of color, particularly because this sense of being afraid of black men resonates across the country, dating back to the early 60s, going and even further back to slave days. So there is some serious concern about communication between the police department and African-American males. And we have to get to a table to rationalize how do we move forward so that this doesn't keep on happening. We know that race is an issue in our community. It's a society. It's a scorn that we've been trying to work on for a lot of years. Thankful for people like Dr. Martin Luther King and those who have took up the torch to actually try to get us to that table, which they did. And the Civil Rights Act, for the most part, was very significant in getting us to a point where we're now having the ability to at least be at the table. But there's some overtones that still exist. And those overtones are from individuals who basically, I don't think, was taught better or don't understand the dynamics of what they're doing and how insensitive it is with regards to a whole race of people who just want their piece of the pie. They just want they want a piece of the American dream like everybody else.
Right.
And to keep getting, degraded and disrespected, it's creating a melting pot that's about to boil over. And you're starting to see aspects of that, particularly with regards to what has happened, with black males and particularly black women like Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor, these individuals who were killed in the custody of police. That's a problem. And what we also got to understand is that anytime something happens across the world, it always reflects back here and it opens up wounds, and we get more people here who want to be a part of that process but can't be there. So it activates here. And it opens up those wounds, and then we relive the same situations over and over again. And we're dealing constantly with a bunch of folks who, for the most part and whatnot, just don't get it, that we all have to get to a table to stop this. And when I say us, these legislators, these elected officials, they actually have dropped the ball. If in fact that they were able, even in Staten Island where you guys are, if in fact that they had stepped up and put things in place and started the process of getting more people to the table, the right people, and stop playing politics, we probably would have had a different conversation on how things are being rolled out with regards to these riots, the looting that's going on, or whatever the case may be. I mean, we're just getting hit every which way. This pandemic slammed us. And by slamming us, it put a lot of people on lockdown. And people are trying to get out. There's frustration, there's anxiety, there's panic, a lot of panic going on. So all of that flustered into a situation where now we're dealing with a mayor who don't have a clue on how to handle it.
And it's hitting everybody. It's hitting the business community. It's our jobs, our pocketbooks, our families, our health. I mean, our sanity. It's hitting everybody. And the mayor doesn't have any idea how to handle it.
No, he doesn't.
Last night, the mayor made a statement that disturbed me, and I'd love to get your perspective on it. He said that the looters could stay out after curfew if they were peaceful. And I'd be interested to hear your point of view on that.
First, that sounds idiotic to say that looters and whatnot. I would believe he has that kind of sleight of tongue. But he also, and he's presuming that these protesters are the looters.
That's what kills me. That gets me crazy.
That's what really bothered me about it.
We support the protesters, for the most part. On occasion, in the last couple of days, matter of fact, all of this week, we've been doing our outreach because I recognize once this is over with, what's next? We don't have any identified leadership behind this whole movement. And we can't depend on these elected officials that are in office right now because they don't have a clue. And if they did, they would have been out sooner than this and not hiding behind the fact that they were waiting for the pandemic to go away so they can come out their doors. One such person I do give a lot of credit to is Borough President Eric Adams. He's been all over the place. He didn't hide behind the doors. He's been out there and been active. All of a sudden now, all these elected officials, whom I have a lot of issues with, and recognizing that they have failed leadership that's not moving us in the right direction, all of a sudden now they're popping up talking about things that they want to get on top of. You know, the city council speaker, Corey Johnson, he was ghost for a minute. Now all of a sudden he wants to run to have these meetings and have these committee meetings to talk about the racial issues in New York, only because he's possibly running for mayor. So, you know, my job has always been to just take the wool off, you know, off all that stupidity and let people see people for who they are. That's all I do. And it always bothers me to hear people say, well, you know, I don't always agree with what you have to say. Then if you don't agree with what I'm talking about, and I'm only speaking about the lack of leadership, the lack of real community bonding that we have that can help bridge our city together. Like, we should have a relationship with our brothers and sisters that live in Staten Island. We should have that with our brothers and sisters in the Bronx. There should be no separation of us. There should be elected officials working to bring all of us together and getting us on to be a tone to a conversation that allows us to live peaceably and as one community, one family. That's what I've always said. But apparently we have that issue. We have a bunch of people who, you know what it is. And then I explained this before, and I don't want to take up too much talk to
we have a whole hour. So you go.
Let me get it off my chest. What I've always said is this, that I find that there are some elected officials, not all, because there are some that I can actually say that work, but I'm not gonna blast them because I want them to continuously doing what they're doing. Yeah. But those that I find, or a majority of, that when you have, like, let's say for instance, we have term limits on city council. We don't have it on Congress, and we don't have it on the state level. But term limits basically shakes the pot. And all these people that are city council members are going to be looking for somewhere to go. Because now it's in their system. They love that they hear their name at the luncheons and the breakfasts and all of that stuff. They want to feel like they're important. So now they're looking for the next seat to go to. So they got to look in their specific district with the individuals that they had to have been working with for the last 2 to 4 years. But at the same time, now looking at that person like, I really can't give this person too much credit because I may have to go after them in a little while. And I can't make them look that good. Yeah. So what happens is there's a dysfunction with regards to their communication of them working together because they're too busy worrying about who's coming after me and then how I'm going to get to the next level in my career. So we don't get the representation we need because these, I don't want to say it, but these assholes are not working together. And that's where we have a dysfunction in being able to get the services we need because no one's paying attention. Now, I do see that there's some elected officials. Nicole Maliotakis, I love her to death. And when I think she's doing a fantastic job, she does care about people. But every time you get caught up in politics, people want to degrade you and make it seem like you're just being political when you're really trying to do the job of people. Eric Adams, another person I give a high accords to. But I can't say that about a lot of others. And I have a problem with that. And that's why we don't get the representation we need in our community.
Yeah. Tony, say hello to Monet Harris, who joined us. And
Monet, what's up? What's up, Monet?
And we have Leah Richardson joined us as well. And
Leah from Co-op City, what's up?
Yeah, and Natasha Christopher.
Hey, Tosh, what's up? Let me tell you real quick. Tasha was one of the a handful of mothers that I worked with when her son was killed in Bushwick. He was shot and killed at the age of 14.
And she said you're forever family to her, and that's you know that's why you're family to me, us. I mean, you're always there for everybody.
I think everything you just said is why we need public advocates like you too, because the politicians are in a trap that they can't get out of, and I really don't. I don't blame them. You know, I didn't start working in politics till I met my lovely partner here. I had no idea how deep that went. But it does, and that's why we need people to speak up, and that's why I'm all for the protests too. That's another way of making this happen.
Hey, listen, I'm definitely all for the protest. You know, what we have in common, Tony, is we both swim upstream, right? Yeah. We call it as we see it. Mm-hmm. We don't care if we make enemies, and we have, and we call them out, whether they're Democrat, Republican, whatever the situation is, we call out, especially elected officials. I was at a rally a couple weeks ago to open up small businesses. And you know what the mayor said to us? The mayor said, if you open that business and keep it open, I'm going to yank your health license. Now, that is the way that man made his money, was on his health license. And so he had to close the business down. But now, I mean, and I'm not comparing, but I'm just showing you how inconsistent this mayor is. We still have our businesses are still closed, and we have looters and rioters in the street, and he was afraid to issue that curfew because he was afraid it was not going to be good for race relations or for his persona or whatever. There were peaceful protests going on in the daytime, and people were making their voices heard, but we saw that the looters, that incendiary group of people that did not come from New York, that wasn't part of our community, were coming in at night, and he allowed them to come in. And what ultimately happened with that? People see pictures on the news of Black and brown people pulling out, stuff from Macy's or from wherever, and then they say to themselves, "Oh, these are the protesters," and that was absolutely not the case. And this mayor did a bigger disservice, in my opinion, to the Black community by not putting that curfew earlier and by not getting people off the street during, early enough and allowing that rioting and looting to go on. I mean, I might be wrong, but I don't think so.
No, I want to agree. I'm going to be honest with you. I was all for the curfew so that we can weed out those individuals and whatnot, because quite frankly, what I'm understanding, they slept during the day and then they came out at night.
That's right.
And we would have been able to round more of them up. But there were some folks, from our city that participated because they saw an opportunity and what have you. And their stupidity, I give one such case. A young lady said her good friend's son, who's like about 15 years old, heard what was going on, went downstairs and saw that one of the stores was broken into. So he goes in there being nosy and he's looking in. Boom, whoop, whoop. Boom. Who shows up? The police shows up. He gets arrested for being a looter and didn't have anything in his hand. But because of his stupidity of being nosy and not listening to his mother, he was arrested. And there was a lot of people like that. We had a young lady walking out of the building from her job from the Bronx, 34 years old. She got picked up with looters because they ran past her and they got lumped all together and hauled them off to jail. So my thing is this: yes, there were protesters that we really needed to support, but we can't, in no way, shape, form, or fathom support the looting that went on and the violence that went on against the police. That I can't support, because two wrongs don't make a right. And to turn around and to see in one of those videos where a lieutenant, somebody just walked up behind a police lieutenant and slammed him in the back of his helmet, in the back of his head. That I don't agree with. Then you have a state senator, and I want to be very clear. Senator Zelnor Myrie and what have you goes on TV and talks about police brutality, that he notified the police and he was wearing a shirt with his name and everything on it. But yet he was standing in a crowd amongst the individuals that was throwing water bottles and throwing skateboards at the cops. And they just got tired of that happening because you were putting their lives in jeopardy. So they sprayed the whole area to back people away. I'd rather them spray than shoot. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
But now he wants to go out there like he's some victim of a cause because I notified somebody that I was going to be there and I was there to help with whatever. I'm like, first and foremost, I understand it's an election year and these elected officials tend to use whatever tools they can to get themselves to be victimized so that they can get, quote unquote, these sympathy votes is what I want to say.
The photo op, that beautiful photo op with him with his hands behind his back.
With the milk somebody pouring milk in his face.
With all respect to both he and to the assemblywoman that was on site, you have a situation where you see water bottles getting chucked over and skateboards and the cops being attacked, and you're crying that you got arrested or harassed or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I witnessed a couple of days later a nurse in her scrubs come out in Flatbush, I think it was, when there was rioting going on and things being chucked, and she came out of nowhere. She was getting out of her car going to work, and she was able to quell the violence from a nurse in her scrubs with she didn't have her name on the back of her shirt. She didn't notify anybody that she was going to be there. She didn't have a team of people with the phones ready to take the picture for the palm card. But she was able to keep the protester, and there's video everywhere about it. She talked to those not the protesters, the rioters, the kids that were throwing bottles, that were throwing rocks. She spoke to them, she backed them off, and she told them, you are making it bad for everybody. If you want to honor this man, George Floyd, then do it peacefully. Go ahead.
I blame the media for some of that. I mean, what they focus on is what people focus on.
Sensationalizing it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because unfortunately, and I mean, ultimately, we can go back to the people because the media only puts out what people want to consume at the end of the day. I think, the 24-hour news cycle destroyed us and forced our hand there. But there has to be some way, without turning into a fascist nation, to quell the need for the media to put out a 128 character headline. Which is for everybody to me. So I don't know where you stand on that, Tony, but I would love to see some accountability in the media somehow without being, Red China and just shutting off the media. I don't know what the answer is. I think
I've actually found myself, although it's always been a tool for me to get the messaging out that I wanted to get out and go after those folks that I know needed to do their job. I find oftentimes that the media really doesn't know who to talk to. And truth be told, they pick people who, once they put them on a mic, then now these people think that they're, there's a spokesperson for everybody. So now they're running to every mic that they can find because they want to be seen. Somebody stops them on the street and say, hey, I just saw you on Channel 7, or whatever the case may be. But my question is, if they even ask me or say to me, hey, I saw you on the news the other day. I said, well, did you hear what I have to say? Did I make sense? And whatnot. And oftentimes I come across like-minded folks who can have a conversation. But also I found people and what have you didn't know what the hell I was talking about. They just said they saw me.
Yeah.
And the messages, it all depends on how the media, packages it as well, the story. So, I have some issues with that. But I know one of the things that we were successful in doing, and I've always had a quasi relationship with the police department, because I recognize that somebody's got to be able to walk that fine line and be able to say, look, fair is fair, right is right, and whatever the case may be. I know that there are people that are angry, but I can't blame every police officer out here for what one cop has done in Minnesota or in Ferguson or any other place. But what I can say is that there's a sense of responsibility for whoever takes that oath, that they have to do CPR. They have to present themselves with courtesy, professionalism, and respect. And I hold them to that. But I'm not going to condone, and I'm not going to join any bandwagon that tells anybody to go out there and assault a police officer, particularly on my own selfish note, that I have family members that are in uniform. I have friends that I really adore and I have very good relationships with that are on the police department, and they're out on these streets patrolling. I'm never going to join anybody to say, go kill those cops or hurt those cops. I'm never going to do that. What I have to say is we got to work together.
Yeah, just like I'm never going to go and say those protesters are evil because of that one horrible looter or opportunist. It's the same.
And that's the whole thing. Yeah. And okay, so we have to say hello to some more friends of yours, Tony. I think Leah Richardson.
Leah Richardson is my homie again out of the Bronx. She's good people. You're thinking about my wife, Leah. That's not her.
No. I know Leah because I know that she helped us on the public advocate campaign, right?
Up in Co-op, yes.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. See,
yeah.
I got good memories.
Oh, okay.
And Nicole Harris has joined
out of Red Hook. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think and we have Christopher Latigola. I can't believe I can't pronounce the Italian names.
Yeah, really. What's going on?
Latigola. So let's talk about a little bit about responsibility, right? Because you touched on something there. People have responsibilities in their lives to do the right thing. What percentage or what do you think about a parent's role? Parents' roles across the board, because the parents are training the kids that are going to be cops. Parents are training the kids that are citizens of all shapes and forms. Parents are training the kids. What would you say to a parent that would help their children, whether they're living in public housing or whether they're living in the suburbs? What would you tell a parent to do to tell their kids so that they don't find themselves in a predicament? What is the best information you could give? Well, whether they're going to be a cop or going to be, a regular citizen.
Well, as one who is a parent, I have 5 of my own, and 3 of which are young black males, between the ages of 18 and 27. I've always said to them clearly, choices are to be made. Now, the question of the matter is, what choice are you going to make to become productive, or are you going to put yourself in a position or what have you to be a failure? And I give them all the tools I can give them and all the conversation I can give them, but I can't control what they do out on the street. And this is one of the problems we have, if I can digress for a second. The government has gotten involved in us raising our kids. And in what they have done is literally have taken the power away from the parents. Now, I'm not talking about, going out there and killing your kid because you just spanked them or whatever the case may be. I'm not talking about abuse, although there's a fine line for that too, given some of the circumstances of issues that have happened that, the extra liberal people have come in and said, oh, don't put your hand on that kid. You're going to kill that kid or whatever the case may be. In the Black community, a lot of us were raised by being disciplined because we knew what our punishment was going to be. And that punishment means you're going to get a red boot behind if, in fact, that you don't do what you're supposed to do. Now we have kids that don't fear that because they know they can pick up the phone and call the cops on their parents. And now parents are being arrested, but yet our parents are being arrested, but yet you're not arresting the individuals that's out there hurting our kids in the street that has a responsibility of controlling them. And that's not all police. Those are the ones that actually feel that they can take that authoritative position. So now you've created an atmosphere of these kids not respecting authority. So when they get out there, they're making their own decisions based on the fact that they think that they can. And they're not listening to the school teacher. They're not listening to the parent. They're not listening to the cop. They're not listening to the judge. They're just going to go out there and keep on making mistakes because they've taken the element of authority out of their bloodline so that they don't respect anything. And then they think they know everything. And I say to my sons all the time and my daughter, I'm like, look, you go out there and act a fool if you want. And this is the courses that's going to be taken. Now, I'm not going to leave you hanging, but I'm sure not going to go out there and rally up and what have you and bring all my resources to the table to help you if I know that you were the problem. So make that decision and handle it.
Too many parents don't do that. That's the real problem. Our kids are being I'm going to say a bad word, Leticia. I'm so sorry. They're being pussified. They're being lightened up. And my fear is that one day when it doesn't sound like a conspiracy theory. One day when that solar flare hits and the lights go out and their cell phone is off, they're going to walk themselves into a wall and we're going to lose. They're going to lose
their mind. They're going to lose their mind. But again, I don't want to blame. But Leticia, I'm sorry. I don't want to blame all the parents because some parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, and they're at work. So oftentimes their kids home and whatnot, that are teenage. That's probably sitting there watching little brother, little Joey, or whatever, and they're having that sense of responsibility. And when they get outside and get amongst their peers, I liken it to the thought process of the rapper Biggie Smalls and whatnot. His mother was a very classy, very, awesome woman, worked hard. Biggie goes home, and when she sends him out to go to school, he has on the school clothes. Then when he gets out the door, he runs up to the roof and changes and puts on the hood clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's not a reflection on her. That's a reflection on what society in the street has been able to embell on him because they made him want to have to fit in. And a lot of these kids do that so that they can protect themselves too.
Oh, and I get it. Yeah. But listen, not for anything, my mother worked too. And if I was sleeping when she came home and I did something wrong, she'd wake me up to beat my ass. I'm telling you, that's the truth.
My mom used to pour a bucket of water on my head.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm not.
But that's not abuse.
But I mean, I worry that we have become now a society that if our kid, we are so focused on giving our kids more than we had ourselves that we have not differentiated for them between the words want and need. Right. You need food in your belly to live. You need a roof over your head. You need sneakers. You need clothes. You need those things. But you don't need those $400 pair of sneakers, or you don't need that $1,400 iPhone, or because I see it with my grandson. Look, I'm raising a 15-year-old grandson, and teenagers are teenagers. They're all stupid. In my opinion, they're all brain dead. I think Bill Cosby did a bit on that they're brain dead until they get into be about 25 or 26. Right. And my grandson, wants, I want these $700 sneakers. I said, oh yeah, well go work for him. He got his other grandmother to get put money in a bank account, and the kid goes out and he buys the sneakers. And then when the sneakers were all worn out or he got too big for the sneakers, I said, now what? Now, what do you? Now you have that $700 pair of sneakers, and you have nothing else. The next, I want. We didn't give it, but look, we all want the best for our kids, but
Yeah.
we know that George Floyd had a mom, and he called to her as he was leaving this earth.
Yeah.
And we know that Officer Chauvin had a mom. And so we know that somewhere along the line, Officer Chauvin went off the rails, right? Or whatever she did wrong. And there's a lot of police, I'm not going to say a lot of police that go off the rails, but a lot of police that are put in situations of pressure, of tension. And, I think it comes down to their upbringing about whether they're going to use excessive force to get the job done, or whether they're going to have sympathy and empathy for the person that they're arresting. And sometimes I think that they feel so much like it's us against them, like they're always with their back up against the wall, that they react before they process. And
let me play devil's advocate opposed to community advocate right now.
Sure. Okay, go ahead.
If you look at it from this standpoint, and I get it, and I talk with a lot of police. I mean, I've white friends, black friends that are in uniform, Hispanics, you name it, Asians. The conversation is always the same, that there are a lot of police officers who put on that uniform, that badge, and that gun to go out there and do their job. But when you have a society or a city administration that sends mixed messages, and they put the pressure on our police officers, and that pressure is brought down by from the chiefs to the deputy inspectors, or inspectors to the deputy inspectors, down to the captains to the platoon sergeants, that this is what we have to do. And if you're not doing it, the pressure is on you, and you have a job. And if you're not doing that job, they're talking about firing you, knowing that you need that paycheck to go home and feed your family. You bought a brand new home, or whatever the case may be. You're raising your family. You got bills to pay. That's not an excuse for anybody to go out there and commit abuse. But at the end of the day, or racial injustice against anybody, but I understand where the pressure's coming from. And then you have a city that don't support you. And I was just having this conversation with somebody, and I was like, as I look at these cops, and I was listening to one of the scanners the other night, because I needed to hear what was going on in the city.
Yeah.
And I got on a citywide scanner, and I listened, and I'm hearing the dispatcher sending cops all over the place. It was frenzied. And I'm sitting there like, these cops got to be bugging out. Because then somebody actually had a portable where they were able to break in on the central broadcast, and they were cursing at the cops on the radio. They were sending them to fake locations. So these cops were being overworked. And my point is this, that they're under a lot of pressure from this city, who's sending the wrong messages and putting them in precarious positions. There should have never been an order to go out there and enforce people wearing PPEs. This should have never. That was not their job. If you wanted somebody to go out there and do that job, have the social workers, have the damn, traffic agents or somebody go out there and do it. Why put our police in that position?
That's right.
I have a problem with that. So one of the things that we did is that I galvanized a lot of the leadership particularly Brooklyn, because when they came into Brooklyn, those protesters, just to jump on that, and they just decided that they were going to destroy Brooklyn. We said, no, we're not having it. You get one night at it, and then we shut it down. So what we did was we started calling all the leaders out. People started protecting their blocks, and was telling the protesters, no, move on from here. We're not trying to have it.
That's right.
I started to galvanize the leadership, and I spoke with my bishop, who is the head of the United Clergy Coalition, Bishop Seabrooks. And he says, all right, let's get on this. And he started rallying up all of the bishops and the pastors. And we recognized and what have you, that we needed to be the voice of calm. And so we pulled together where we went to both borough commands, both in Brooklyn and in Brooklyn North and Brooklyn South. And we kneeled. We didn't kneel to fight the power. We kneeled for prayer, to pray for peace and healing and the bringing together of our community, so we can start the process of getting us back to the table, so that we can start having the conversation again, community and our young black males and everybody. And we're working on that right now. Even we're being given Borough Hall to do this program, that we're going to work to get our kids together. So there's pictures out there of me kneeling with
George,
the police
I think
department.
you have some. Yeah, I think George has some. He might put them up. We'll continue the conversation though. There you go. That's what you do.
We went out there and kneeled. You see Borough President Eric Adams. You see all the pastors. You see clergy leaders from around the city. You see precinct council presidents, clergy council presidents from various precincts, community residents, community leaders, civil activists. There was about 50 to 100 of us at one location on that Tuesday. And then Wednesday was about 50 of us out in front of Brooklyn South, which was the 67th precinct on Wednesday. So we went out there and let the cops know we support you. As long as you're doing your job, we've got your back. But if you're a renegade or whatever the case would be, we're coming for you because we don't want you on the police force because you're making everybody else look bad.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of even on the Staten Island today, they had a big rally going down Highland Boulevard, and I watched it live. The Advance broadcasted it, and I saw 3 different incidents of people hugging the police.
Yeah.
Thank you, and kept walking. The media twists it. So that's where the myopic, I don't even know if I'm using that word right, but the narrow view that we get sometimes doesn't bring the good stuff like that to light. And I love
myopic.
Yeah,
you were looking for myopic. This is also an educational show.
No, English language, not so great.
Amaria Khan joined us.
Hey.
I think, did I tell you Nicole Harris joined us?
Yeah, you told us.
Okay.
Eula Gallic.
Ilya Gallic. George Beret joined us. And Antonio Di Simone joined us. And I think that's everybody that's been watching. So, Tony, I think that it was really important what you said about the cops and what we just discussed about cops being human and about personal responsibility, right, on the parents, part of the parents. I mean, for me, if I was mayor of this city, I understand that this is a corporation, and I made a contract between the people who are my taxpayers and the city to protect them, to keep them safe so that they can go about their business, do their business, and pay the taxes so that the city could run, right? So that's basically, in a nutshell, what the city of New York is. Part of that is keeping people feeling safe. And you touched on it, and you said that the mayor had sent mixed messages to the police, and they didn't feel like he had their back, or that he had their back. So now that we're talking about a city that has a $92 billion budget, and the police department has a $6 billion budget, okay, which is not even 10% of that $92 billion. They're now saying, because they haven't been able to collect the taxes, that they're going to cut that budget by $1 billion. Now, this is at a time when, let's just go through it for everybody so that they could get their head around this, right? The police, NYPD has to make sure that they protect some of the world's most famous icons, right? Statue of Liberty, Brooklyn Bridge, all that. That's part of their normal patrol, right? So they have most of the celebrities, right, that live in New York City, right? We've got iconic Radio City Hall. We have Broadway. We have all that they have to do. Now they have also international terrorists coming to New York City. They have domestic terrorists coming to New York City. To add insult to injury, now, because the mayor got rid of bail, they now have all these people in the street that are bad guys, right? And if people don't go back to court because the bail bondsmen were all gotten rid of because of bail, right? There's no more bail bondsmen. So now the cops have to play bail bondsmen, like you talked about before with the PPE. So now we're going to ask them to do 41,000 cops to do all of what I just described, and they're going to get 1/6 of their budget cut. Which communities do you think are going to hurt the most over that? Do you think the white community of Toad Hill is going to have a problem getting a cop down there?
No.
What's it going to do to public housing? What's it going to do to public housing? What's it going to do to the African American community if the budget gets cut? Do you believe that there is real support for cutting the budget for the police department and the African American community?
Well, if you listen to people like Jumaane Williams, who is very clueless and went out as the public advocate, and I say that because realistically, I don't think he thinks when he wakes up in the morning. I think he gets up there and he feels like, oh, I'm going to go be public advocate today, and I'm going to go give a speech and support. He supports this stupidity. I don't support cutting the budget. I think that, and you spoke about a small myriad of stuff that needs to be protected. We still have a bunch of folks on our streets that are mentally ill, and they're committing crimes, and rape is up. Gun violence is up 200%. There's been 60 shootings in the last 60 days, and what have you. So, I mean, why are we getting rid of the police department that we need? What we do need is Mayor de Blasio and his wife to get back that $800 million that they spent so we can get that back.
Oh,
And then they
she's
can use that.
Actually, it's 1.6 because she wasted part on the education program and part on the mental health program. So it's
If we
about
could get
1
that money
billion.
back, we'd be fine. So I don't see, and I don't see any answers coming from these elected officials. All I see is them rah-rahing because they're catering to special interests. And everybody's knocking on their door like, well, we can't give you our vote if you can't help us with this. And truth be told, there's like 5 people in a room trying to cut these deals. And, and they go and they stick these elected officials up, and they think that there's a problem when there's a whole community in Brooklyn. There's a whole community in Staten Island. There are people who pay their taxes, what have you, that deserve to be protected and deserve to have access to the resources that's going to allow us to live as good New Yorkers. I don't understand these guys. If you look at Germani and all these other elected officials, they only come out when it's popular, and that they can stand up there and give the every impression to the voters out here that they're doing something, and they ain't doing a damn thing.
Yeah. George Beret says, how are they going to close Rikers Island now if the population at Rikers being low has caused the violence and crime rates in New York City to the top? And we are only 6 months into the year, yet look at the gun violence in New York City. But the media doesn't tell you that. And that becomes, we go back to what George said, and because you wear so many hats, Tony, right? Media, liaison to the police, community advocate. There's certain. It's not sexy for the media to hear that Tony Herbert is having to sit down with the police to actually heal the divide that's going on in the community. It's not sexy for the media to hear that Tony Herbert doesn't agree with all respect to the looters and who's looter, who's protester. All I saw was a bunch of white privileged children throwing bottles and bricks at cops. That's all I saw in so many of these protests. But if Leticia says that, or if Tony says that, it's, everybody goes up in arms. Oh, no, we're sympathizing with the black people. No, you said it best. You need sit downs with these police officers. You need to bridge those divides. So the media doesn't want to report that. They much rather report the privileged white children throwing, the bottles over and hitting the cops in the head. And to me,
I'll give you one better. Sorry, Leticia, I'll give you one better. We've been looking to meet with, when I say we, some community leaders have been looking, because there have been past relationships with past police commissioners. But there's been a position where we've been trying to meet with Commissioner Shea to say, hey, look, you've got folks that are willing to go get to the table to bridge this gap. But they're meeting with individuals who don't respect the police department.
That's right.
They're meeting with individuals. Just the other day, they ran to a meeting to have with this numbnut that basically calls himself a civil rights activist, but is only out there as an ambulance chaser to get paid from one of the highest paid attorneys that come in the black community to get all the business on police brutality.
That's it.
And yet they're dragging him into a meeting like he's important and he's significant when he isn't. And yet here we are saying we're 40, 50 deep that have over 10,000 people that we can bring to the table. Why are you not meeting with us?
Yeah, and they're giving them more power to make it worse in a way.
Exactly. Because the impression is given that there's some kind of leader.
Yeah, that there's some kind of leader. And the one thing I find really interesting here is that, this, you said it, you listened to the scanner, and the police were getting called all over the place. Any thinking individual has to say to themselves, these kids couldn't have organized this rioting, this looting, all of this by themselves. This wasn't by accident. In my opinion, this was some of the most nefarious planning I have ever seen. Right? We had the people with the ears, the wires in their ears. Every single kid had a phone, right?
On the corner.
Every single person had a phone in their hand. Look through the nightly news and see that after the cars were burning or whatever else, they were all taking pictures. Why were they taking pictures? What were they doing with that? What was going on? Because they wanted to make sure that those pictures went across social media. They were standing inches in front of cops. calling them terrible, horrible names. They put their hands up and say, "Don't shoot," in the front of the line, while in the back of the line, a brick comes flying at
over.
Or firecrackers. I mean, really, let's just think about this. Here's what I don't understand, right? These kids, you're telling me their parents didn't know where they were, or their parents gave them so much money that they were willing to spend all their money on bricks and firecrackers and water bottles and I mean, really, they went in their own pockets and went, "Oh, this cause is so important to me, I'm going to go purchase all of this stuff." I mean, you know, the booze from the Molotov cocktails we know came from the liquor stores, right? But you know, I witnessed something on the news where they were marching up, and I saw a skateboarder, looked to be a woman. She had the skateboard over her arm, and she walked past the one of the banks, and with the skateboard,
boom,
kicked the wheels, right? All these people have skateboards, by the way. Did you notice that? Everybody's got a bicycle or a skateboard. It's amazing. Their parents must be loaded.
City bikes. The Blasio city bikes.
Don't get me started on those bikes. That'll be another show.
But anyway, the point that I was getting at was that they cracked that window, and none of them went in to loot that bank. They just cracked the window to leave it open. Later on that night, everybody was going in there stealing the ATM. This was coordinated. If you look at the liquor stores in the beginning when they looted, there's somebody that pulls it all down, that gets rid of it, and then there's a crew later on that comes by to pick it up. So now I'm going to say the thing that's going to probably get me locked up. But to me, this is an organized effort by anarchists to overthrow our government, and they're using George Floyd as the means to do it. And these kids know what they're doing. They're getting marching orders, just like in any election, right? You put the people on the street, you tell them what they got to do, they get their marching orders, but those marching orders are coming with a big paycheck because they got to buy a lot of equipment. Okay, I'm done with my rant.
On that rant, was it you that told me about somebody proposing legislation? I can't remember who it was that proposed legislation that if you are caught looting or rioting and not from the city you're in, can you expand on that? Because I don't remember the details.
I will. As a matter of fact, he was just calling me. Assemblyman Charles Fall. He is the assemblyman from Staten Island. He's proposing legislation that anybody that was caught rioting and looting and was arrested can now not come back into New York City. They are going to be banned from New York City. And also, he was proposing legislation that I didn't read the whole thing, but if you were looted, if somebody robbed you during all these riots, you could get their names from the police, and you could put a lawsuit against all of them for damages. So these are.
I like it a lot. I think it's smart legislation.
And here's a guy, right? He's a young fellow. He's in his 30s, African American, elected to the North Shore, first Black assemblyman from that district, and he held yesterday a coming together, I'm going to call it, because it wasn't a rally. It was part of the Black and Latino caucus, and he brought it over here to Staten Island, and he had the police chief stand up there and speak. He had the elected officials, he had the ministers, he had everybody speaking. And what he said, Assemblyman Fall, was, you know what? We don't do this type of stuff. It is perfectly fine to protest, but we are not going to allow looting and rioting, and we're not going to destroy our businesses. We don't play like that on Staten Island. We should be playing like that anyway.
Yeah. And more importantly, it prevents the misuse and abuse of what the heart of the cause is, And I love the legislation of that. I'd go to war for that legislation. I think it would save New York.
I agree.
I go to war for Charles Fall because he's that type of guy. I mean, I love the kid. Well, I call him a kid only because he took my job. I had CAU under Mayor Giuliani, and he came to me when he got the job, and he said, "Can we sit down and talk about the job? I want to learn about what you did." And that kind of knowledge at the foot of somebody that did the job already, it prepares you well for what has to
Right.
happen next.
Right.
And that's not what we're passing on anymore as adults to our kids. I think that what's going on here has really sent the wrong messages.
Yeah.
And I think that we need more of what you do, Tony, getting people in a room and talking, then we need protests, because nothing is going to be solved by that. You got bigots and racists going, ha ha, see, look, all those black people, told you, and it just ingrained that bigotry in them. And then you have people who were small business owners who were part of the cause, right? Who were like, embrace everybody. Of course I love you. Now they're feeling some kind of way because they don't have a business anymore. Right. And as all they saw on TV was a whole bunch of black and brown folk kids coming out of their store with all of their stuff. And so now, did we help the cause or did we hurt the cause?
That's only because that's all media wanted to show.
100%.
They didn't show a lot of, like, we quote unquote the privilege, actually looting and all of that good stuff, and actually being the persons that set the process up.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate you guys giving me this opportunity, because it's just there are a lot of folks who just aren't plugged in to what's going on. They only go based on what the headlines are, and they don't look that deep because they co-sign it like, oh, okay, but that's what it is, and that's what it is, and that's not the case all the time. What we have to do as a society is really ask the questions. What are our elected officials doing? And what do I need to do to keep my foot on their neck to do their job? That's the bottom line.
Right. Right now, everybody's walking around saying, vote Democrat. And, I don't know. Is that the answer? I don't think so. I mean, you started a group called Housing Residents First because a lot of people living in public housing have been voting Democrat for how many years, right?
But look at their conditions.
And look at their conditions. And so maybe there's an alternative. Look, I'm a Republican, and anybody who knows me knows I'm a Republican. And the reason I'm a Republican is I'm a Lincoln Republican. I believe that everybody should have the opportunity to rise to the top. I don't care if you're black, brown, yellow, it doesn't matter. Everybody should be given the same opportunity, and nobody should be judged by the color of their skin, their background, their economic background. Everybody just get the hell out of the way and let everybody rise. But somehow or another, the Republicans went in the wrong direction, according to the black people we ran the first black judge. But somewhere it was our fault. It wasn't anybody else's fault. It was our fault. Now the Democrats are leading the blacks. So where do they need to be? Maybe Housing Residents First is the place they need to be in New York, Tony.
If we can get that vote, that voting block, it will change the dynamics of politics in this city dramatically.
Well, talk about that. Talk about what?
Well, the key element is there's 500,000 registered voters in public housing. If we can take and get and massage that voting power and point them in the direction of putting up candidates that we know will work for us and be held accountable by us, and know that if in fact that they don't do their job, we have the power to take them out. That's all it is. That's all they need to see, is that there are people who have the power to put me in, and there's people that have the power to take me out. So I have to do what they ask me to do. That's called accountability. That's why I can never be mad at the Jewish community, because they know how to massage their power. They know how to take their vote and go out there and make things happen, because they know that's what's going to make these politicians do their job.
And I think that might be part of the hyphenization of America too, right? Is that voting blocks matter to these politicians, so they put us in little piles. All right, here's the Jewish vote, here's the black vote, here's the Asian vote, here's the. I mean, look, we've been in politics for a long time. I know it. I've used it. I've done what I had to do with it. But imagine if we all came together to talk about housing, the human vote, housing. Finance, economics, instead of just the color of our skin or the culture that we were raised in. Imagine if we demanded that our government talk to us as one united America instead of a bunch of hyphens and voting blocks for them. Yep. Could you imagine what could happen if we all stand together and go, this is what keeps us, brings us together, and this is what we have in common, rather than what we have separate? That would knock them all for a freaking loop. They'd lose their effing mind. How do we control this? I mean,
all we have to do is, and I say it to everybody, because even Cuomo caught on. Cuomo saw that we were organizing, and he came to me and asked, would we be helpful with him on his election? And we did. We got him the votes that he needed out of public housing.
That's right, you did.
But it takes a lot of resources to get the message in and get people to buy it. And then once you've got them and they feel confident that this is something that's going to work for them, you got it. And then the machine starts working for itself.
Well, I keep on making jokes about it, but I'm really serious. You know, whoever funded and organized these looters and rioters, we should figure that out. And we should take that model because they knew what the hell they were doing, man. They outsmarted the best. They were really good at it. And at the end of the day, it was just a relay, right? I got to go over here. I got to go over there. They caused the chaos that they wanted to cause. If we could just harness that power for good, that would be something else. All right. So we're on the 1 o'clock hour. I want to just acknowledge that Sophia Franklin joined us. And I'm sorry, we're on the 1 hour mark. We actually just went over it. And I saw Lucille Chavone. She made it. Our #1 fan. Lucille is always there. Alberto Never joined us. And did I miss anybody? No. Tony, parting words, even though we're over, I think it's cool. I think it's worth staying a little bit while longer. Any parting words? What do you want people to know?
I just think that, we all have to be on one accord. I don't care where you live, if it's in the Bronx, Brooklyn, or Staten Island. At the end of the day, I think if we just got a chance to talk with each other, that we would be able to communicate that we all have similar interests. And that's just to live as decent New Yorkers respectfully and enjoy the city we have. And that also means that we need to be at the table talking with our police department, talking with these elected officials to get them to honestly say either they can do the job or not. If not, then get out of the way and let somebody else that wants to do it, and that is capable of being able to communicate the good messages to the residents here and the taxpayers so that we can get things done. And that's kind of like where it's at. So I just want to say thank you guys for giving me the opportunity and, to have this conversation, to get some things off my chest. And, and I know that the folks that follow me, for the most part, they've heard me. I'm consistent. I try to be as consistent as I can be, with regards to my position on all of this political stuff. Look, I didn't create the wheel. But I damn sure ain't gonna let the wheel fall off if, in fact, that I have information that can be helpful. And that's kind of like where I'm at, and it. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I know what it's like to be homeless out here and not have a roof over your head. I know what that feels like. So at the end of the day, we have people that are living like that. We need to help them. If we help them and we use the money that we get through our funding in the city and we use it right and not let it be wasted by an administration that don't have a clue, but just trying to appease people so that they can position themselves to run for president, or something stupid like that and fail and waste everybody's time, then we can do better because there are better people out here that we can put in office. So I thank you guys for the opportunity.
Well, you're very welcome. So our guest today was Tony Herbert, my little brother, and he is the founder of Advocates Without Borders. He has a show called The Morning Stretch 2.0. You can see it on Sundays, 10 a.m. Go to @TonyHerbert on Facebook. And most importantly, if you want to know a little bit more about Tony and his background, pre-order the book. It's called From Bullets to the Ballot, and it's coming out on September 18th. And I urge you all to order it and to follow Tony Herbert. If you don't already, make sure that he's your Facebook friends. Watch the show. And little brother, I hope you come back on soon.
Thank you. I'm gonna come out when they let us come out. I'm coming out to Staten Island to get some of that good Italian food you took me to before.
I'll cook for you this time. This time you'll eat in my house. All right, everybody.
Cool.
Our next guest is Chris, right, George?
Chris
Monday?
Victor, yes.
Chris Victor is our guest on Monday. He is a film producer and a realtor, and he's got some really great tips for us, and he's got some really good stories for us. So everybody tune in Monday, 2 o'clock. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.